Okay, so what are we going to be doing today? We are going to be talking, of course, why does digital accessibility matter? We always want to revisit that, as well as accessibility laws. Then we'll get into Google Docs and accessibility, moving through several different elements to make your Google Docs accessible. And then looking at the question, is Google Docs accessible to people with disabilities? And then, of course, creating accessible content in Google Docs as well. That will also delve into those pillars of Google Doc accessibility. Then we'll wrap up with some final thoughts on Google Docs accessibility. And then I have some resources to share, as always, and we will definitely have time for questions as well. So with that, let's move on to our next slide. So studies have shown that people need to see or hear a message roughly 7 times before it really sinks in. So it supports the notion that people learn and therefore remember by repetition, right? So thus, the next 2 slides you might see in several of our training presentations for that outcome. We want you to be able to point to these particular stats and point to these laws in order to help inform audiences that you are reaching out to as it relates to accessibility. So why does accessibility matter? Of course, we can list many more, but I wanted to list, of course, these core reasons that we've all potentially seen before, but let's run through them. Of course, it's the law, it's a civil right, and it's a human right. Of course, it's also the right thing to do. 26% of the US population has a disability, so that's roughly 1 in 4 individuals, and that equates to 61 million people. And then bringing it closer to home, 600 Coloradans. And then we are enhancing the lives of everyone, including those with and without disabilities. We're increasing general access to a much broader audience. We're increasing SEO, search engine optimization. We're promoting inclusivity and increasing language access opportunities. We're creating positively to the digital community space. We're showing demonstrated business and community leadership, as well as improving your overall brand and increasing sales and completing online transactions. So, of course, we've probably all seen this slide before as well, but touching on some of these accessibility laws. Of course, the Civil Rights Act was signed into law on July 2nd, 1964. 1986, we saw Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act, and the refresh in 2017 specifically pointed to IT, internal and external facing electronic documents must be made accessible. And then we look at the American with Disabilities Act, known as ADA, which was signed into law on July 26, 1990. This is a major civil rights law that prohibits discrimination based on one's disability. Then we move into a couple of Colorado statutes. Nearly 23 years ago, the Colorado Web Accessibility Statutes were first added. And then moving forward a little bit to the WCAG 2.1 was published in 2018. And in that same year, state of Colorado adopted the WCAG 2.0 standards, followed in 2021 by WCAG 2.1. And then looking at present day, of course, we've got the House Bill 21-1110, which points to planning and implementation. Okay, so let's now think about Google Documents and accessibility. So as we all know, we probably use Google Docs on a daily basis, if not at least a couple times during our work week, right? And Google Docs is really ubiquitous in our remote world. It's everywhere, but it can pose accessibility barriers to some users. So today we're going to discuss the accessibility of the platform, as well as how you can create accessible content using Google Docs. So some assistive technology users may have difficulty navigating and interacting with Google Docs, the interface itself. So it is generally better to create content within Google Docs. And if you have access to Microsoft Word, to export it to Microsoft Word when you're sharing that content with someone who's using assistive technology or sharing content publicly. And that's because Microsoft Word, you can leverage the accessibility checker. Google Docs, the Google platform doesn't have an accessibility checker currently. You will notice that there's an accessibility icon in the styles menu, styles toolbar. But what that is that's for individuals who have screen readers, screen magnification, or they have Braille technology that they're utilizing. And so when they turn on the accessibility feature, it will then be able to work with their respective assistive technology. So it's not an accessibility checker. I just want to point that out. So additionally, while Google Docs is tremendously helpful for virtual collaboration, users of assistive technology may not be able to fully access these features. This particularly impacts screen reader users. So while Google Docs is somewhat compatible with screen readers, there are settings that must be adjusted and new shortcuts that must be learned in order for users to have an accessible experience. In particular, interacting with comments and track changes, I'm using air quotes, suggestions, can particularly be burdensome. So if you are using comments, so if you're collaborating on a document and you're utilizing the comment functionality, it's helpful to indicate within that comment what section of the document you're referring to. So due to these potential barriers, if you are collaborating with someone who uses assistive technology, it's best to ask what platform they feel most comfortable in for document collaboration. So ask the question. So now we're going to get into the different pillars of the fundamentals of Google accessibility. When creating accessible content in any editing platform, it is important to understand the basics of content accessibility first. You might think to yourself as we're moving through these different fundamentals, wait a second, didn't we go through these when we moved through the digital accessibility fundamentals training? Yes, we did. And that's the beauty of accessibility, right? When we're learning these fundamentals, they transcend documents, websites, applications. These are the fundamentals. This is the foundation of good accessible design. So if there's a common document format that you use in your own work within your agency, I have a link here to creating an accessible template in Google Docs, and this is a great way to ensure that your content is created accessible every time. So feel free to take a peek at that link, and it walks you through creating an accessible template. So let's dive into creating accessible content in Google Docs. First up, headings. So broadly speaking, headings and title structure, of course, help make your site accessible and your documents readable. It also helps to really chunk up your information so that users who are sighted can quickly glance and see where are those important chunks of information that I want to review. Of course, to add headings in Google Docs, I have a screenshot on the right here that showcases part of that styles menu. And I have a screenshot here where I have clicked on the normal text drop-down menu, and you'll see then we have several heading options here. So this is where you would go after you've highlighted that text you want to make into a heading to apply the correct heading format. Of course, you want to maintain that proper heading hierarchy. So starting with heading 1, and then any subheadings would then follow heading 2, heading 3, heading 4, so on and so forth. So again, making sure that you choose that appropriate heading style from the styles menu. So that's headings. Let's look at descriptive links here. So descriptive links really help to be used as display text. So a user who relies on a screen reader or text-to-speech software can easily become confused as a hyperlink is read out one character at a time. So a better option is to use natural language as display text instead of the full hyperlink. So down below here, after the steps, which I'll go through, I have an example. So here's a full URL of our OIT Plaza home site. As you can see, it's a bit cumbersome. There's a lot of words here. It's really long, so why not make it descriptive? So then I have underneath that long hyperlink, I have a descriptive text that I have used to help display that URL. And that descriptive text is OIT Plaza. So that indicates enough to me, if I'm a screen reader user or if I'm a sighted user, to know, okay, this is going to take me to the OIT Plaza site. Instead of that long URL, we've condensed it now into 2 words that are descriptive enough to tell the user where it's going to take them. So how does one do this? Well, on the left hand side, I've got another screenshot here indicating a red circle around that link icon within the styles menu. So you would go ahead and highlight the text that you want to display that link, and you would then click on that link icon and then paste in that URL, and then that descriptive text has been linked where you want folks to go. So again, to add the descriptive hyperlinks in Google Docs, you want to enter the natural language link text into your Google document. Then you want to select link text, right-click and choose link, or you can, of course, go to the styles menu and click on the link icon that I have here circled, and then confirm the descriptive text in the text field. As you see here in the screenshot, there is a text box that is above where you would post the link, paste the link. So you just want to make sure that that text is the appropriate text that you have selected, which will then be hyperlinked. And then, of course, entering in the full hyperlink in the link field. And then we have color contrast. So, of course, color contrast aims to support people with low vision or color blindness. And you want to pay attention to that contrast ratio between the foreground and the background colors. And what you're aiming for here is a ratio of at least 4.5 to 1. Here I have an example showcasing 3 different contrasts here. The first one being a very good contrast ratio. So it's basically black text on a white background. And then the second bullet item is a satisfactory contrast ratio. So I can kind of make it out. It's not ideal, but it's satisfactory. And then with the third bullet item being a failing contrast ratio, it's a very light gray on a white background, which makes it very hard for users to read. And then I've got 2 links here. I've shared these links before, both the WebAIM color contrast checker, as well as the color contrast analyzer. These are great resources for you to play around with color, and it tells you not only the ratio, but also gives you a pass or a fail indication so that you can maneuver your colors appropriately. And then we get into tables, and we've talked about tables a couple of different times, of course. You really want to think through when you're using tables, using that for tabular data and not for layout. And you want to make sure that you're using a simple set of data as well. You may be able to represent your data in a list format instead of a table. So if you must use a table, we recommend either using Microsoft Word instead, or keeping your table very short and only using headers in the first row. And here I just have an example of a table that is constructed accessibly, meaning that both the header columns and the header rows are set up so that a screen reader user would be able to move through this table and to be able to correlate the information into the cells with both the header row and the column rows as well. So alternative text, this offers an opportunity if you have an image to be able to enter in that descriptive text for people who are blind, legally blind, or have low vision, obtaining information provided from images by listening to the text-based descriptions, which is called alternative text or alt text. So all images that contain important information should include the alt text. The alt text should be as concise as possible. So looking at up to 150 characters. If you feel like you have a more complex image or a graph, consider using a caption instead, which could fall underneath your graph or more complex image. That way you can use more characters to explain what is happening within that respective image or graph. So Google Docs offers 2 different fields when you enter in alt text. One is called title, as you see here on the right in my screen capture, and the other one is called description. So within Google Docs, both of these fields may be accessed by a screen reader. But if you export to Microsoft Word, again, if you have access to Microsoft Word and you have content in both fields, the description field will only be preserved and the title field will be deleted upon export. So for this reason, only enter alternative text in the description field rather than the title field. So here I have a description of a big green tree on a dirt path with the sun shining through. So that explains the image that I have selected for my Google Doc. Kristen, do you have a question about this slide?
Yes. Should I wait till the end?
Oh, please, you can go right ahead.
Thank you. Did you just say that if we export this, so if we create a document in Google and then, for instance, download it as a demonic PDF, does it lose its alt text and all of this stuff? And then we have to remediate it as a PDF?
So this is relating to if you are exporting to Microsoft Word. So if you're exporting to a PDF, then what you have created within Google Docs will be preserved. This just speaks to that export to Microsoft Word.
Great. But I will try not to convert documents to PDFs anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen, did you have a remark on that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, PDFs, they are demonic. I get that. They're not always demonic. Let's just say that. But most of the time they are troublesome. However, I will say if you are exporting to PDF from Google, or even if you were doing it from Word, you always want to do that last check because there are a couple of things that don't get caught. And you want to make sure that when you're in Acrobat or Common Look, which you can do it in either, that you check your tags so you make sure that you're not getting a bunch of extra tags or something got tagged incorrectly. Sometimes these programs carry tags from your previous line depending on how you input your content. So yeah, most of the accessibility work you can absolutely do here, like Kate's telling you, but you will have to do that final check if you're exporting the PDF.
Thank you, Karen, for pointing that out. Very smart. It's always a good practice to make sure that you run through the accessibility checker in the respective platform that you're using, if it's offered, of course, to ensure accessibility for that particular format that you are utilizing. So thank you for pointing that out, Karen. Thank you, Kristen, for the question. And I see some comments here in the chat as well. So I will try to address those here after I get through my slides. So lists as well. Lists are a great form of accessibility from the standpoint they provide that structure, order to the content in a linear fashion. So lists are recommended as potential replacements for simple tables, as I had alluded to earlier, as tables can be more difficult to navigate, and sometimes information in tables would be better suited for lists, of course. So, oh, Chelsea, yes. Do you have a comment?
Just a quick one about tables. I would recommend list for the moment, simply because or sheets, simply because right now there is a bug in Google Docs, which we have reported to Google, where you can't designate that column or row header like you can in HTML. So it automatically will read as column 1, column 2, column 3, whatever, when you're going across the table and not in the header row. I do not want to muddy the waters on this, but that's a pretty important, nasty, icky bug that I really hope gets fixed. As of this writing, so your mileage may vary if you're listening to this on the recording. Sorry.
Thank you, Chelsea, for pointing that out. I appreciate your perspective. Yeah, tables can get really hairy, so really consider why you're needing to create this table, and think through, would a list be better in this particular case? And if it would be, then consider using lists instead. So lists, what are they? They highlight, of course, a series of steps, requirements, or pieces of information in a visually clear way. Use lists to help your user focus on important material as well. I don't know about all of you, but I'm always drawn to lists because I feel like it will quickly tell me the information that I need to zero in on. And it helps me to help myself as I'm reading through this to parse out those important pieces. So let's walk through and look at why lists are useful. Of course, as I mentioned, they highlight levels of importance. They help the reader understand the order in which things happen. So as you may remember from the digital accessibility fundamentals training, we talked about using bullets and then using numbers. So if things need to happen in sequential order, consider using that ordered list function, which would be step 2, step 3. And then if it's a bullet order, things don't necessarily need to happen in that sequential order. But still you want to call out a list in an unordered fashion by using bullets. And that, it helps readers skim and scan, much like headers do. And it makes it easy to identify all steps in a process as well. And add white space for easy reading. Again, you have just blocks of text. It makes it really challenging for someone to understand what exactly do I need to get out of this as the reader, as the consumer, as the user. So these lists provide for that easiness for our eyes if we're visual users, as well as if we are reliant on assistive technology, is indicating through HTML that this is a list, and so therefore you can easily move through it. And then of course, finally, they are an ideal way to present items, conditions, and exceptions. Okay, so some final thoughts on Google Docs accessibility. I've got several bullet items here that I'm using a list for to kind of conclude our time here today for Google Docs accessibility. So first, be thoughtful about your use of tables for layout design. I think that we've drilled that in as well throughout these slides. Less is sometimes better. And consult your resources. As I mentioned, I have some resources that are linked here within the Google slides, but also if you have resources as well, or of course your accessibility consultants, you can lean on to make sure that you're creating accessible Google Docs. Write clear, simple, and effective content. Define your acronyms. Of course, defining them first and then indicating in parentheses the acronym. You can then move forward with utilizing that acronym, but you want to make sure you define them right away. Content should be written in an easy to read conversational style. Put the most important content in the first paragraph. Write short paragraphs and minimize unnecessary words. Sentence structure should be simple and varied. And of course, use active voice instead of passive voice. And finally, choose lists over long paragraphs, lists to make your content easier to scan, as we just noted. So here are some resources that I have linked to. First is the Google Docs to Accessible PDF. Lori went over this, I believe, at our last open office hours. So you may all have this, but I've linked to it again, just in case. And then Google Docs, it's accessibility and guidelines. This is the Google site for accessibility guidelines, essentially walking through everything that I went over today, and then creating an accessible template that is, of course, linked earlier in the slides, but I've linked it here as well, and then our OIT accessibility site. And of course, if you have a resource to share about Google Doc accessibility, we do have an ACE documents group led by Brian Stafford and Karen Pellegrin. So if you have something and you're part of that ACE group, consider sharing it so we can review it and vet it and potentially add it to our list of resources.